Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laurie Gagan, and I am the founder of StopSprayingGlyphosate.com. I again have the privilege of interviewing Suzanne Roth Paul, and today's topic is going to be on how toxins, past toxins, can wreak havoc on your immune system. But a little bit about Suzanne. So Suzanne Roth Paul is a certified primal health coach who considers herself a wellness warrior for women suffering needlessly at the health and hands of a broken medical system and the food industry. She believes that good health starts in the kitchen, where you have control over what you eat and what you feed your family. But first, you must get out what Suzanne calls the poisons in the pantry, out of the kitchen before you can begin to heal or prevent and avoid chronic illnesses that are rampant today, things like obesity, heart disease, autoimmune issues. And we'll get further into that because right now there's over 110 autoimmune issues that wreak havoc on our health. Suzanne has helped countless women turn back the clock on aging. And I have had the pleasure of attending and speaking on her Secrets to Radiant Health Summit recently, where she brought 20 health experts together to not only educate the public, but to inspire all of us to wake up, take charge of our own destiny, and what we need to do to have better health and to bless our families with better health. And on a side note, I was on her summit, Secrets to Radiant Health. I personally, interviewing with Suzanne, I had the largest amount of views, and most of them, I want to say all of them, stayed on for the entire interview that I did with Suzanne, which was roughly about an hour and 20 minutes. But it is my pleasure, my honor, again, to introduce my dear friend, my wellness warrior colleague, Suzanne Roth Paul. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Suzanne, or please let me know if you do.
Hey, Laurie, thank you so much for that nice introduction. I really appreciate it. And yeah, you and I rocked the house on that interview series that we did. And what was so fascinating about it, it was a lot of information. I mean, you went deep in a lot of the info about the toxic burden loads and what they do to our gut and how they affect our brain and all of that. And what was so great about it was people loved it because this information is not being told. And they don't know this. A lot of the audience didn't know this information. And I got such great feedback about, basically, like you say, breaking the code of what is the cause of chronic illnesses is
Right.
toxic burden load.
Right.
So yeah, no, that was super fun. And it was great having you. And I'm so glad to be back and honored. And, I really am really honored to be able to share my story today, because I just want to tell you, I haven't really spoken about this in live or in person yet. I've not done it. I've told a lot of little bitty dribbles about what's happened to me, but I've never really told my story. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Well, I'm really proud of you. I mean, it's a big step. As you well know myself, how I got started in holistic health and going to school to be one of Dr. Amen's brain certified health coaches. I myself have my own testimony. But Suzanne, I think you realize that if we ourselves sweep this under the rug, we really can't expect to help others. And I think that, we as mothers, as women who have had our own issues in our past life, that we need to be that wellness warrior, because we could save and educate countless number of women struggling as well with immune issues. But with that said, one of the first questions that I have for you. So what were some of the challenges that you faced with heavy metal toxic burden load in your body?
Wow. So it goes back to a very, very long time ago. I just want to say that a lot of this is very emotional for me. So, I do get animated. I do get a little emotional about it because it's my history. It's my life. And this year, I'm proud to say I'll be 60 this year, and I've never felt better. I've never, in my mind, looked better, just healthier, vibrant. But I suffered a lot of my years, and I look back and I'm like, I lost a lot of years because of just not knowing, and at the hands of doctors who just all they knew how to do was to medicate. And so, they just didn't know. So anyway, I'll start as far back as when I was 2 years old. That was when I had my first really bad situation. I didn't know it. I don't remember it, but my mother loves to tell a story about how I almost died at the age of 2. And she would shake her head and say, we don't really know what happened. And I remember for decades thinking, wow, I almost died. But I never really put 2 and 2 together, what that means to how I have progressed all these years and some of the symptoms I had. So basically what happened was, I fast forward just quickly here, in the last 10 years, I had really come to a point in my life where my body had fallen apart. And it was really an opportunity. I don't call it challenges anymore. I call it an opportunity to really find out what was the underlying cause of all of these years and decades of not feeling good. And so what the toxic burden load that I discovered was this functional medicine doctor. She was a toxin expert, toxin removal expert. And she basically had said to me, Suzanne, guess what happens at the age of 2? After she read my medical history, she said, wow, you almost died at the age of 2. Well, guess what happens? And of course, I'm a mom, and I said, terrible 2s. What was I toxic burden because I was a terrible 2, at temper tantrums? And she said, no, you got the most vaccines at the age of 2. And she said, there you go, after reading your whole history, that from that point on, through elementary, through middle school, through high school, well into my 20s, well into my 30s, I was the classic canary in the coal mine. When anybody got sick around me, they'd get over something in 3 days. I'd have it for 2 to 3 weeks.
Wow.
I suffered from extreme flu symptoms every year for all through my elementary through high school years. My mother would say it was like clockwork. She'd say, here comes the winter season. Suzanne's going to be out for 3 weeks with some sort of flu. Now, as I got older, I got mononucleosis. I had strep throat. I found out later on that, much later on, that I had Epstein-Barr virus in me. I had a whole host of all these viruses in me when we did testing about 10 years ago. And it was like, where in the hell did I get all of that stuff? And so a combination of things, it's not just one thing, but Laurie, you remember, I've talked to you a little bit about growing up in South Texas. I grew up in an agricultural community. There were fields of wheat and cotton and grain all around me. And we played in it. We rode our horses in it. We basically lived in this agriculture community, and they were spraying constantly. We had the aerial spray. There was an airport not too far from us, and these folks, that's what they did. They sprayed all of the fields. So I was there getting burdened by already having the burden of herbicides and pesticides, which you know very well.
Right.
And so that add that to it. And then we lived in the South. Mosquitoes, they were, we had mosquitoes the size of, small airplanes. We'd laugh about, be careful, they'll lift you up and take you away. They're so big. But we had to have, I remember coming down the street, and this, truck was spewing all of these toxins out. We'd all run in the house to get away from it, but it was in the air, and it was there, and it was on a regular basis. So that kind of combination of things that the functional medicine doctor I was working with 10 years ago, well, actually, she was just 5 years ago, she started looking at everything and putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And so that's how, when we started looking at the fact that I also had, I had illnesses all through my life. Chronic fatigue. Let's see, what did I suffer from? Chronic fatigue, hormone imbalances. I missed cycles all through puberty years. I'd have some cycles sometimes I wouldn't. I would go 6 months without a period. I had cystic acne that was so painful I couldn't even open my mouth. And I had headaches. Probably the worst thing was the fatigue, because as I got older, I was hanging around with all my friends, and the joke was, we're going to go out for the weekend. We're going to do something Friday. We're going to do something Saturday night. We have to pick which night we're going to have Suzanne come with us. Because if she comes out with us Friday night and we go partying, and this is high school, early years in college, she drinks too much, she stays out too late, and she eats, at all night diners, the crappy food, she can't get out of bed the next day. And we don't get to see her on Saturday night. So, I laugh about it, but it was tragic. I just couldn't keep up with my friends. And so, I always thought, what happens with that was the shame and the embarrassment. There's a lot of that is causal, which led to a lot of mood issues. So I was always a lot of up and downs with moods. But I would say that the toxic burden load was just building upon itself, because in my 40s, when I had that fallen, kind of like wake up call about, I had to do something with my health, we realized that I had a lot of food allergies. Now, Laurie, I don't know if food allergies are a cause of all these toxic burden loads, or I just am sensitive to them regardless. But we know that having a gluten sensitivity is because our wheat today is so much more dangerous than it ever was, even when we were growing up.
Exactly.
And I'm
right.
So, yeah, I don't know if you want to ask me a few things, because obviously there's a lot to talk about here. But
yeah, so you know what? So let me make a comment. I mean, most people struggling today looking to find the root cause, they often find themselves in the hands of conventional medicine doctors, maybe who haven't transitioned or have educated themselves further. Not all of the conventional medicine doctors, but I mean, they're busy being doctors, and there's new technologies and new waves and new modalities of things that have been done to help people with not only food sensitivities, but the challenges of immune system issues. So some of these doctors want to still follow and think the old way, when again, there's new healing techniques. And I often tell people, like, on those type of doctors, and God love them, I mean, they're trying, they just really kind of need to step out of the box. But I'm almost certain the doctors still practicing things from 10, 20, 30 years ago did not, drive up in a horse and carriage to get to work. And I use that because decades ago, when we only had horse and carriage, maybe our great grandparents, and then became the invention of the automobile. Well, people don't show up, to work on a horse or a horse and buggy today. Why? Because of the creation of the automobile. So technology kind of allows us to come into what are some new treatments, what are some supplements that can be helping a compromised, weak immune system. We don't go back to what did they do 20, 30, 40 years ago, because we know that even produce, a carrot is not a carrot in today's term. The nutrient value is not there. But with that said, you talked about some of the challenges. You talked about the doctor who really helped you try to find the toxic load burden. But tell me, how did these toxins affect you mentally and emotionally?
Oh yeah, no, you're just talking about the doctors again. So, I was seeing endocrinologists, gynecologists, and dermatologists at that time, and their solution was always, as I got older, it was birth control pills, and we know they're not benign. And I was on them for 30 years, and we also know that really messed up a lot of messes up your libido, number one, and it messes up so much more because it's a synthetic hormone. And so I wasn't even able to feel like a woman at times because it was all being masked by this birth control pill. But what their solutions were the thing that was so frustrating to me. And Laurie, the worst part about it, who cares what they did 20, 30 years ago? They're still doing it today. Because I talk to parents with kids that have acne and cystic acne and issues. They're still prescribing antibiotics, dangerous antibiotics. And I talk to women today who've got, even perimenopause symptoms, and all they're doing is putting them on antidepressants and sleep medications,
right.
and maybe some HRT, maybe some hormone replacement, but and then they're not really monitoring it very well with them. But what I was saying, what you asked about how did this affect me emotionally? Well, it was downright damaging because I was a young girl, even in my 20s and 30s. You wouldn't believe the doctors that, especially male doctors, I mean, it happened a couple of times where they would see me as an attractive young thing and they think, oh, you're just complaining. You've got a perfect little life. Would you just, don't worry about it. Stay on the birth control pills. That's the only thing that they could offer. And there was a lot of derogatory comments as well that I was, too immature to handle some of the requirements that they were requesting of me. Do you remember basal temperature? What was it?
Yes. Yeah.
You had to do your temperature every morning.
Yes. It was
And
a little bit of time consuming. Yes.
time consuming, and I was exhausted most of the time. But what really was the hardest part was the emotional damage that it had done to me. So I'd already had a propensity, because it runs in my family, for depression and anxiety. So what these metals were doing, we know that heavy metals, I had mercury and lead and arsenic. I had, by the time we found this out in my 40s, I was pretty high on the heavy metal content and levels, and those things really mess up your brain, and they store in your brain. And one of the things I want to mention is, because I was thin, or am still thin, I don't have a lot of residual body fat. What happens to those toxins, Laurie, when we know they store in your fat? They love fat cells. And what happens when you're thin? Where do they store? Our brain. And because our brain is 60% fat. And so a lot of those toxins were storing in my brain. And that was causing memory issues. I was an average student in school because I couldn't remember things very well. I struggled to do my homework. I struggled to do testing. I worked hard at it, but it was very, very debilitating for me because I hung around with a bunch of very smart girls and they were all A students. I was not an A student. And so I remember that kind of like self-esteem issue. And, I still suffer from memory issues and having these things of brain fog and such. But the emotional aspect of what that did to me was probably the most devastating.
And I'll add to that before you finish. I think what ends up happening for most people, women in general, is that the symptoms that they have, like you, and you are right, you end up in the hands of, a doctor who really hasn't gone out and has done the research on how these toxins affect our emotions. So they walk in, people walk into their doctor, and before you know, they're walking out, they're labeled with anxiety and depression. And Suzanne, I hate those words. I always tend to use anxious thoughts, sad thoughts, negative thoughts, overwhelming thoughts, because in today's life, with everything going on, with COVID, with all the flu, with all the mandates that we're having, people are overwhelmed. And then what happens is they get labeled with some type of a word like, hey, you have anxiety, or hey, you have ADD, and you're walking out with some type of an anxiety or depression medicine, and never once do they address root cause. Never are they asking, are you eating organics? Do you have dyes in your food? Have you tested your water? Have you tested for mold? Do you have heavy metal toxic burden? They never ask those questions. They're just quick to do, here's your prescription, call me in 7 weeks. And they've spent 5 minutes, 7 minutes with you, and they really barely know your middle name.
Well, and that's true. And one of the things I was going to mention was I never got 3 key questions asked of me. What is your medical history like? What was it like for you even when I was a little girl? Nobody ever asked me what happened to me when I was a young child, knowing that at 2, I almost died. The second one is, what does your diet consist of? Let's talk about what you eat.
Right.
Never. I can't tell you, Laurie, how many times I asked dermatologists, does this have anything to do with my diet? I mean, I was asking that question in my teens all the way through to my 30s. No, it has nothing to do with your diet. Here, take some more antibiotics. And so that's how I messed my gut up. That's what led to the chronic health issues in my 40s where I fell apart. And the third question is, and this is a big one that I now ask everybody. I said, don't get embarrassed by this question, but how are your poops? Do you go to the bathroom regularly?
That is such a great question.
Oh,
and I always say, if your doctor is not talking about poop, you may want to consider finding a new doctor. But go ahead,
We'll have to
continue on
walk
that.
out. I say that too. I said, "Has your doctor asked you about your poops and the quality of them?" And I never will forget my mother-in-law being asked that question, and she was so mortified and embarrassed. And I said, "But that's what it takes to know the quality of your health." Because Laurie, we
Right.
love to tell the story about taking the garbage out, and I love to talk about when you don't release yourself from these toxic, the excretions. You put all this food in, you put all these toxins in, you put all this stuff in your body. It's got to be removed. That it's like a trash can. If it overflows, what happens when it overflows? You get, bugs, you get roaches, you get, ants, you get all kinds of pests that come in. That's what happens to your gut. And so, but Laurie, right now, women, just every other woman I talk to is plugged up. And they've got constipation. It's a constant thing, and they're on medications. They're on hormone replacement therapy. Their thyroid's messed up, but it's not working. And I'm like, well, how's that working for you? Well, it's not. And so, what is your doctor asking you to do? I just stay on the medications.
Right.
They never talk about the quality of excretion, and so we know that toxic burden load. For me, I'm very, very blessed, and I will say that I have several saving graces from my early stages of life up until now. My father was a gardener, and bless his heart, he's 99 in April. He'll say my secret weapon was lots of vegetables, and we grew up with vegetables. So I will have to say that saved my hide, because I was forced to eat a lot of healthy foods along with all these health issues. So I know that has carried itself really well for me throughout my life. And I have never had a problem with constipation. So there in and of itself will show I was able to excrete a lot of this crap, no pun intended, or I definitely would have probably had some really debilitating disorder by now. And even though I had all these symptoms, and they were debilitating, but I was still living a pretty normal life. And for that, I'm very grateful. But when I had this doctor come through, evidently, she was looking at all the evidence. And she came back and said, Suzanne, this is probably the primary cause of why you have suffered all these years, is because you've had, it's been accumulative. And that's why, we had to really look at my diet. And so this is why I created the Poisons in the Pantry document. This is why I created this for women and people, anybody out there that's suffering. If you're not looking at ingredients now, that's your smoking gun. Look at my list, Google poisons in ingredients. But my document was created for folks like you out there that are suffering, because I didn't have that. So what I'm giving now as a wellness advocate is all the things that I didn't have. And what I would have liked to have seen when I was suffering so badly, that's the number one thing is, you've got to start with good nutrition. And then you do have to test. And that's where Laurie comes in. And what she's so good at is knowing what kind of tests to do. So you're not hemorrhaging money. You're not, breaking the bank because you've got all these unnecessary tests to do. And really, it's pretty simple. I mean, you talk about that all the time, some basic testing that needs to be done. But I would say, number one, you've got to get the toxic burden testing done to see where you are. Because Laurie, isn't it true? Have you ever met anybody that doesn't have a metal test or toxic, what is it? I'm just basically, it doesn't have to be heavy metals. There's lots of other things. But have you ever met anybody that has a pretty good
No, and Suzanne, babies are born with 250 toxins. I mean, toxins start accumulating in the womb. That means when babies are born, 9 months before they're born, they already have toxic burden. The question is, how much is the toxic burden load within that baby's body? And we know that because we see cases of autism on the rise. So we know that toxic load burden is just getting worse and worse and worse. But I have to tell you, Suzanne, I am so proud of you for conquering the poisons in your pantry that have lurked in your kitchen, in your homes when you were a child, because it's those type of foods that put an allostatic load on the body. And what I mean by that, it's the wear and tear. And so when they're bioaccumulating and we don't know, if we can't get that toxic load out, guess what? You can be absorbing through food, water, the air that we're breathing, and your liver is going to be burdened. But the next question that I have, just based on that, what steps did you take to recover?
Well, I had already 5 years ago, when this doctor was really looking at my history and I was still having a lot of symptoms, I was already in good shape because I had taken out all of the insidious poisons that were poisoning me. But we know that there's a lot of ingredients and a lot of foods that are not good for us. We know wheat has absolutely no benefit in our diet whatsoever. And it's probably the most popular ingredient in just about everything you can buy or
Oh my
get.
gosh, everything.
Food was the first thing. I was already, probably 90% good on my diet. The other part was I had to start finding a gentler way of detoxing. So I had done a series of different types of modalities, which, everything from activated charcoal to bentonite clay, spirulina, all those kinds of, detox products that can work. But at the point where I was, it just wasn't moving the needle. And so I started on a product, Laurie, that you and I both love and know, called Clear Drops. And I'll let you explain what it is exactly, but it basically is a product that is very simple. It's one product. You take it in the morning, you take it in the afternoon, you can take it throughout the day. But that was a big thing that started moving the needle for me, was getting that toxic burden load out of my brain, because it crosses the blood brain barrier and can attach onto some of these toxic ingredients that are in your brain that need to come out, and you can expel them. And so that I started noticing my brain was, I started noticing my brain coming back to life, and my memory, my recall, just kind of having things that certainly helped me function better. And then I was doing a lot of foods that were toxic releasers, cilantro. I was eating arugula, things that the liver loves. So I was pumping my diet up with foods that were really supportive. And then I started using another product that was very, very helpful for a natural way of detoxing, that are stem cell activating patches, and they really are harmless, but they have a way to support the cells. So we know that you have to have a healthy cell to be well. So I've started doing more cellular support, so that it really got into the nucleus of my cell and could start supporting it in a way that it was strong again. Because that's
Right.
I think that's the big burden right there, is our cells are working so hard. We are burdening them so much to digest foods and toxins that are not healthy for us. So they're
Yep.
busy doing that. We can't even absorb the nutrients that we need.
Right, agreed. And so you mentioned Clear Drops. So the Zoe Clear Drops, which is ZOI, basically is a zeolite that was invented by Dr. Nicholas Karapanos. And Dr. Nicholas Karapanos was a cardiovascular surgeon from Greece. And he came to the US after winning a Grillet Award. He came to the US to train the Mayo Clinic heart surgeons and the Cleveland Clinic heart surgeons. Obviously, and this is probably another talk, but it's the lymphatic systems that carry these toxins to and from and in and out of the lymphatics, the lymph nodes, the bloodstream. And so he invented a zeolite. And basically what a zeolite is, it's when the volcanoes erupt and they meet the cold sea. And it creates this negative cage-like structure. And you could think of it as a magnet, even though it's not a magnet. But basically what it's able to do is it's able to cross the cell membrane. And it is the only triple patented zeolite in the world. And how Dr. Nicholas Karapanos got his patent, we have more information. So if you are interested in learning about it, you can please feel free to contact Suzanne or myself. But how he got the patents on it is he infused the zeolite into a vitamin C soluble. So what happens is the vitamin C soluble is able to cross over the cell membrane to bind and eliminate and to carry out the garbage in our cells. And he often says, until you heal the cell, you will never fix the body. And that's basically what it is. It's the toxic burden load that damage the liver, damage the kidney. You know, we all know lead loves the bones, mercury loves the brain, aluminum loves the brain. And we look at the amount of people right now, even getting their dental fillings out, who these dentists aren't even practicing really the good techniques that the biological dentists do. And so it's creating more toxic burden in our body. So, Suzanne, what do you want to tell your clients about staying healthy so that they can regain their life back, regain their health back, and give a healthier, cleaner life to their families by the poisons they remove from the pantry and the food that they put on their table?
Well, the most important thing is take responsibility for your health now, kids, because I'm telling you, it right now we're at a point of no return for some of us with our health issues. The crisis is that bad. And we just saw it with COVID, with these viruses that are going to be more and more prevalent, that you got to have your body as strong as possible, and you need to have all of your, you need an arsenal of weapons to basically defend yourself from some of these toxins that we are being burdened with. But I will tell you, that's why I created the Poisons in the Pantry document, because the first thing you can do, you do not have to work with anybody. You can just get this document. One is free, one's an upgrade for $20. It's very affordable, but you can start healing yourself right away by just going through your pantry and getting those toxins out that you're eating every day, especially the food you eat every day. And that's the first thing. The second thing is,
and I'll add to that, because I have to tell you, I can't even tell you how many countless families that your ebook have saved, and moms and dads who will come up to me and say, oh my gosh, I didn't know. So thank you for creating that. I just wanted to put that out, but then let's go back to what you were saying.
Yeah, thanks. That's been the biggest, the thing that's been most profound for me is people say I eat well. They say I eat healthy already. And I said, okay, well, take my Poisons in the Pantry documents and just have a look at it. Give me some feedback. And they're literally shocked. They had no idea what industrial seed oils mean. At least they had maybe an idea of one or two of the oils, but they had no idea how many there were and how much how the restaurants are using them. And so for goodness sakes, please, 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 watch your eating out at restaurants. This is what I'm finding to be why we're having such an explosion right now with illnesses. People are eating outside the home more and more, and especially our young children. My goodness, I'm watching my son and what he eats, and it's 50% of the food, if not more, is eating out. And he's got, some health challenges. So, watch what you're doing, cook at home as much as you can, and eat real food for goodness sakes, and watch those processed foods. That's the bigger challenge is for children. And for most of us, we want our snacks and we want our treats. I'm not saying don't eat them. That's why my document's so important. I give you alternatives. But, when you're looking at what you can do, I'm just going to say that if you can't afford, I'll throw out some things that I would recommend to people that are in a pickle right now and their health is a mess. They really need support. I'm going to tell you that, and Laurie can support you on this really well as well, because she's helped me on a lot of this for the labs. Get yourself a DNA test, because your genetic makeup and your historically from your parents and from how your body is built to be operating, you basically get so much information out of the DNA testing. So I highly recommend that. Get a toxin test. There's some basic tests you can do just to see where your loads are and make sure that you are either in good shape, or if not, what you need to do about it.
And Suzanne, just so that you know, even for your viewers, we can drop ship those tests anywhere in the US.
Absolutely. You can do it from home, the safety of your home. I had a phlebotomist. Lori had some testing done for me, and she sent the labs. I got a phlebotomist out. It cost a little bit more, but I didn't even have to leave the house. And so those are really easy and available nowadays. A full hormone panel and, some nutritional testing, your vitamin B, your D, your C, your zinc, that sort of stuff. Just get an overall base for what's going on in your body. And, if you're able to really have a good specialist. You know, I'm pretty good at reading things like that, but Laurie's exceptional. You just have somebody give you some, feedback, and your doctor, if you have a doctor you're working with, you can go over all this with her or him, but, get some basic information on yourself so that you can then be prepared for what to do moving forward. And what Laurie and I can tell you, we've been through the trenches. We have been there. We've hemorrhaged money on all kinds of treatments, and I don't even want to tell you how much money I've spent in the last 20 years, that we now know very simply what products work and what don't. So, use us. We're resources, and that's why we're here. We want people to ask questions. We want people to reach out to us. I don't charge hourly. When people are working with me, a lot of times I give them free discovery calls and get them started. So, I just don't want to see people suffering anymore. And then the other thing was that, you have to really do some lifestyle adjustments. It's not just about food. And one of the things that's helped me tremendously, Laurie, and that, is my faith. Finding a spiritual center where I can go to and be with like-minded people, prayer, meditation, yoga, gentle exercising. Don't overdo it. That's one of the things I learned, Laurie, was all of my excessive exercising that I thought was helping me when my body was taxed was actually harming me. So I've had to cut back on my maniac bike riding, my cardio for 2 hours on a bike ride. No, I'm now doing 25, 35 minutes on a bike, and I'm happy. Get a little sweat, get my energy up. That is really probably most important. I don't know about you, Laurie, but lots of friends spend hours at the gym and they're not dropping any weight. They're not it's usually a weight issue. And I'm pretty sure we know why. Their toxins are hanging on to them because they're stressing their bodies out.
Storing in the fat. So that is a great wrap up. So where can we find your ebook? And the reason that I'm asking, and anyone that's a parent, whether you're married, you're single, a mom, or your dad, we have to think about the Easter baskets coming up. So we want to stuff those Easter baskets with food and candy that are clean, no red dyes. We could spend hours talking about what red dye 40 does to a child with ADD or anxious thoughts or sad thoughts. But let's stuff the Easter baskets. Anybody that a mother or grandmother, where can we find your ebook, Suzanne? Because I've got to tell you, it has already changed hundreds of lives across the country.
Thanks, Laurie. Yeah, so you can find my ebook I'm on social media, but I also have on my website, yourwellnessdesigner.com. There's a link in there to get the free number 1 poisons removed from your pantry. And inside that document, you can upgrade to the Poisons in the Pantry ebook. It looks like this, and it's basically 16 pages of really good information of like the next 5 insidious ingredients. And it dives deep into some of the other ingredients that aren't so specific on a food, but it's on ingredients that, you may not even thought about. And sometimes we really have to look at the ingredients we're putting on our skin, the toothpaste that we're using to brush our teeth. I mean, it doesn't go that deep, but it definitely starts giving you awareness of what to be looking for. And this is the little freebie, which is just 4 pages, and it's pretty comprehensive. And it's front back, 4 pages, easy to read. And I give you really good resources in there, as well as alternatives. I tell you what the product is that's bad. I tell you why it's bad. And I tell you what to use in replacement. So you're getting a lot of value, so that I would have given anything to have had this when I was suffering so much. So thank you. I'm also on Instagram. That's where I spend a lot of time sharing information and free videos on foods and things that I do. Your Wellness Designer. And in all of this has information and phone numbers and ways to reach out to me if you want to talk. If you want to just direct message me, I'm open to conversation. We just have to get on my calendar. But I'd love to talk to you.
Well, thank you, Suzanne, from the bottom of my heart, for being a wellness warrior. We love and appreciate you. And everyone out there, get her ebook for Christmas baskets. Not Christmas, Easter. Christmas gifts too. But get out there and get her ebook. You'll really be surprised on what you learn. But goodbye for now, and we'll chat soon.
Thanks, Laurie.
All right. See you. Ciao.